Alright, today we're asking a good old first take question. Who has the most to prove this upcoming year? Now we're going to tackle a wide range of players, and obviously all these guys are not trying to prove the same thing. We have guys trying to prove their all-time great cases, we have guys trying to prove they're young stars in the NBA, and we also have guys just trying to prove they are NBA level players. So we might as well start with the younger players, and let's not overthink it. Everybody has this guy on their list, and I'm talking about Jonathan Kuminga. Now, we all know how last year went. He pretty much had to demand a trade to get more minutes, and when he got those minutes, he produced. He's currently eligible for a contract extension. I don't believe the Warriors are going to do that. If he has an all-star level season, they're going to be content with paying him all-star level money, so I don't feel like they're in any rush to do that. And the simplest way I could put it is last year Klay Thompson was second on the team in shots. He's gone. Last year Chris Paul was fifth on the team in shots. He's gone. Now Podge is going to take more shots, Moody's probably going to take more shots, Buddy Hield's there, he's going to take shots. But last year Kuminga only took 15 shots 19 times. He's going to have 19 of those games in the first 30 games this year. And in those games he averaged 23 points on 54% from the field and 41% from three. He also shot 80% from the free throw line, which is a huge deal. And still in those 19 games, that was only 31 minutes per game. Those shots are going up and those minutes are going up. I believe he's about to have a breakout year. By the end of this year, Warriors fans are going to feel pretty dumb that some of them wanted to trade Kuminga and Podge for Lauri Markkanen. To me, there might be a question at the end of this year, who's the better player, Kuminga or Markkanen? That might be a hot take, but I believe he's going to have that type of year. And if he doesn't, well, he's not going to get paid and he might be a trade chip. So a lot to prove for Kuminga, but clearly I believe he's up for it. Now this next one might surprise you, but I'll explain why, and I'm talking about Shaedon Sharpe. Now I'm not sure how much we should take into account this previous year where he only played 32 games and he had the abdominal injury. We've seen how much the abdominal injury affected Dame. Maybe you want to cut him some slack on his shooting percentages for last year. And I know it seems very early to be saying this about Shaedon Sharpe, but when you consider the rest of this roster and the fact that they're probably going to have another high draft pick at the end of this year, and they're going to have to make a decision on, let's just say there's a guard there that they want. And these things can change, but it seems like it's going to be a very guard-heavy lottery. VJ Edgecombe, Dylan Harper, Cameron Carr, Drake Powell, all these guys are guards, and if Shaedon Sharpe doesn't look like he's going to be this all-star that everybody projected him as, does it change, what they do? And also, if he's not looking like this all-star, are they going to be in such a rush to get rid of the 25-year-old putting up 22 and 5 while being one of the best pull-up three-point shooters in the NBA in Anthony Simons? Are they going to be in such a rush to get rid of that guy? Because I feel like even more so than Scoot, a lot of their plans had to do with Shaedon Sharpe being that star. And again, if he's not, there are a lot of questions for this team. You could say the same thing about Scoot, but we also have the contract situation where Shaedon Sharpe will be eligible for an extension at the end of this year. And maybe I'm jaded, maybe I sound like a little bit of a Shaedon Sharpe hater. I just know the hype that was around him, and I'm just not sure he's going to be that level of a player. And to show you guys I'm being fair, we're going to talk about a player that is very, very similar to Shaedon Sharpe, and Jalen Green. It's been reported by Bleacher Report, I'm not sure the actual reporter, but I've seen it on Bleacher Report, that they are expecting the Rockets to wait out to restricted free agency. They're not going to extend him right now, and I think that's smart. Because even coming off the high of the end of the year, and it was an extreme high, you still look at his stats for the whole year and it's not very impressive. And there are so many nuances of the game we could break down with Jalen Green, but it really starts with the three-point shot. I feel like most of us thought he was going to be a better three-point shooter than he's shown to be. This year he shot 33% on what's considered wide open threes, which NBA.com considers nobody within 6 feet. And there were 2.5 of those shots for him per game. That's a lot of shots, and I'm not going to harp on that stat. That doesn't really mean much to me. It just means a lack of consistency. Because if he's not going to be a consistent shooter, I don't believe the rest of his game is good enough to make up for it. He's not a good enough playmaker, not a good enough finisher. He doesn't really have a floater game yet. I mean, it looks nice, but it doesn't really go in yet. The mid-range is good, it's not great. It was a lot better this year. Let's see if he can continue that. But my point is, if he doesn't have the shooting to add on to it, those weapons become a lot less effective. If he's shooting the ball well, all of a sudden it's a lot easier for him to get to the rim and get fouled. If he's shooting the ball well, all of a sudden it's a lot easier for him to make, plays off the dribble for someone else. As we've seen to end this year, where post All-Star break he shot 36, nearly 37% from three, and it seemed like the game was just a lot easier for him. So if he's not going to be able to do that consistently, I have real questions. And the thing is, he's in a perfect spot to do it. With Şengün, with Jabari, with Amin Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, they need what he does. They just need him to do it well. You know, he takes 7 threes a game. They need him to knock it down, and this team could look a lot different. Next up, we got an all-star here, and I'm talking about Ja Morant. Now, I spoke about this in a recent video titled They're Being Left Behind, or They're Getting Left Behind, something like that. And I just spoke about how Ja Morant 2 years ago, the world was his. To put it in perspective, Ja Morant barely played this year, and he had the 11th most sold jersey in the NBA. Above Jokic, above Anthony Edwards, above Joel Embiid, above Kyrie Irving, and he barely played this year. That should let you know how popular this guy is. But if I'm Ja Morant, I'm looking at 3 guys. Well, really 2, the last one's debatable. But I'm looking at Jalen Brunson, and more importantly, I'm looking at Anthony Edwards. And the 3rd guy is Tyrese Halliburton. I don't really know about that one, but those 2 in particular. Last time I played a full season with no injury, no suspension, I was better than those guys. And now nobody's coming into this season having Ja Morant ranked above Anthony Edwards or Jalen Brunson. If I'm Ja Morant, that's a bit of a problem. And you know what? Shea's probably on that list too, because before OKC and before Minnesota, it was supposed to be the Grizzlies, right? It wasn't just a popularity contest with Ja. No, they won 56 games one year, and then they won 51 games the year after that. So Ja Morant has a lot to prove out here. Or maybe a better way to put it is he has a lot of people to remind. All right, now we're going to the East, and we're going to talk about 3 All-Stars in the East, and we're going to start with Damian Lillard. Now, Dame, very low-key, a ring would mean much more to Dame than like majority of the NBA. I think a ring for Dame might mean more than for Jimmy Butler. It might mean more than for Paul George, because the way our minds work, it immediately catapults him above guys like Chris Paul, which I would say is false. Kyrie Irving, I feel like that is a great debate right now. Who's better all time, Dame or Kyrie? I feel like that's a fair debate. But Dame was recently on a podcast talking about how people don't give him his credit when he was top 75 all time. Kind of crazy, but I understand, you know, professional athletes have to tell themselves that. But Dame gets plenty credit. Maybe too much credit. And that's why I believe if they actually go out and win a ring, all of a sudden the mythical stories about Dame become even more real. The clutchness become, I'm not saying he's not clutch. Sure, Dame's clutch, right? But the resume doesn't match up the way we talk about Dame, in my opinion. We never really talk about the moments where Dame came up short because no one has ever had those expectations of Dame of being this all-time great level player, yet he somehow got to this all-time great level player without those expectations. It's kind of crazy because he's never had the Chris Paul or James Harden or Westbrook expectations. And honestly, to me, early Dame was overrated. Like 2015, 2016 Dame, that player is extremely overrated. And I say that to give credit to how good he's actually become, because if you look at the last 6-7 years of Dame, he hit a different level than he was those 2015, 2016 years, in my opinion, and it's right there in the numbers. But since he's hit this new level, he hasn't really been able to stay healthy, and he just ended another year injured. If I'm not mistaken, the last 3 years he's ended the season injured. I know I'm coming off like a Dame hater, and I'll wear that if you want to call me that. I just don't think we talk about him fairly, and only in this light, in comparison to Chris Paul and James Harden. We don't talk about him fairly in comparison to those guys, because those guys have better resumes than Dame, and we don't really hold him to that standard. That's my only problem with Dame. But if he wins this year, people are going to start having that conversation if they're not already having it right now. And if they win this year, it's going to take Dame having a superhuman performance, so he'll deserve all the praise in the world, because that roster does not look great. It's going to need Dame to be, you know, one of the best players in the world. But also Dame has this year and then next year on his deal before having a player option in the 26-27 year. So just hypothetically, if this doesn't work out and Dame wants to go somewhere else, he needs to prove he's still one of those guys, because 2 of the last 3 years have been pretty underwhelming. He had an amazing playoff series, or he was having an amazing playoff series against Indiana. Then he ends up getting hurt again. So a lot of questions with Dame, but I actually feel like he's going to have an amazing year. I just don't think this Bucks roster will be good enough, and we'll get to the end of the year and it'll be a conversation about what Dame could potentially return the Bucks. And maybe the Bucks want to go a little bit younger and build around, you know, start the retool around Giannis. I feel like that's how this year is going to end up, but we'll see. Now we're going to go to New York and talk about maybe the most disrespected all-star in the NBA. The way people talk about this name, his name was in trade rumors all summer long, and I'm talking about Julius Randle. Pretty simple. This team looked great last year without him, and they went out and got Mikal Bridges as well. They also lost Isaiah Hartenstein, which means they're gonna need Julius Randle to be able to play more of the 5. Is he up for that? Is he up to just be a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, not necessarily an off the dribble 3-point shooter? Is he gonna buy in to the little things that can make this Knicks team great? Because he does have the capability to do it. The last 4 years, he's taken over 17 shots per game. Is he okay with taking 13 shots per game? Because that is a crazy drop off. Is there a world where Mikal Bridges is taking more shots per game than Julius Randle? I think there is a world where that happens. I'm not sure that's the ideal world, but I could see it happening. And how does Julius Randle actually react to that? He also only has this 1 year on his deal, and then he has a player option for next year. And more than likely, he'll opt into that $30 million for next year. But in his mind, he probably feels like if he balls out this year, he can go out and get a max offer from somebody in free agency next year. And how does that affect the way he plays on the court? If Julius Randle is trying to get a max deal, is he okay with taking 13, 14 shots a game? It's a lot to figure out in New York. Hopefully Jalen Brunson is the type of leader that can figure it out. But it's a lot on Julius Randle on the court and being the backup 5 and also being the guy that probably has to sacrifice the most. Last but not least is Joel Embiid. Now Joel Embiid, I don't believe in you. I don't believe in it at all. I look at this roster on paper and I see a team that should be second in the Eastern Conference, if not first, but that might be a little bit crazy. Second in the Eastern Conference, above Milwaukee, above New York. I look at this Philly roster, top down. This team is built perfectly around Joel Embiid. I just have no belief that Joel Embiid is going to take them home. And I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. And to me, that is exactly what most to prove means. How are we going to remember Joel Embiid? Are we going to remember him like Patrick Ewing or Hakeem Olajuwon? Even though Patrick Ewing did more in the playoffs than Joel Embiid has so far. You guys get what I mean. When we look back in 20 years, are we going to look back and say it was Jokic and Giannis and Embiid was a distant third? Or is it going to be an argument who was the better player? Because right now, nobody is making a Joel Embiid argument. And it's really strange for someone to be this dominant in the regular season and have these questions in the playoffs. The only example is James Harden. But even James Harden, I feel like, was more revered than Joel Embiid is right now. Maybe because people could always point to the Warriors, but in the case of Joel Embiid, if you just look at the Eastern Conference and the story of the East over the last few years, we have rivalries between every other team. Milwaukee versus Boston, that's a rivalry. Milwaukee versus Miami, that's a rivalry. Miami versus Boston, that's a rivalry. Where is Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers? I don't think Joel Embiid is ever going to have a better roster than this, at least not being the #1 guy. And there's no way Joel Embiid is going to let everybody else get a chance at winning this conference besides him. Don't let Jalen Brunson sneak one in. I know it's absurd to say about an MVP, but to me, Joel Embiid has by far the most to prove this upcoming year. But that's just my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please drop a like, please comment, please subscribe. I'm out. Peace.